All right, we are live for the January 23rd, 2024 Ask Me Anything live stream event here. And if you were tuning in early, thank you so much for logging on. And I really appreciate everybody. I get a lot of people that do watch a lot of these live streams. And I know I've mentioned this before, I think, but I'm always amazed at how many people tune into these live streams, not just after they go live, but or while they go live, I should say, but also after the fact. And I get approached now more than I ever would have expected in public with people who do watch these live streams on a regular basis. So just as a quick reminder here, this is an Ask Me Anything event, which just usually means you can go ahead and ask me anything, any question you have. No guarantees I'll answer it, but I'll do my best and try to stay up with the questions as you post them in the comments kind of next to the screen, depending on how it looks on the screen or the computer that you're looking at right now. Real quick, I just got off the premiere. I launched another video on my regular channel, which I encourage you to watch if you haven't yet. You can do it after the live stream, or if I bore you here, you can switch over and watch it now. But it's about the second failure of the Democrats last Thursday in the Thurston Superior Court to remove Trump from the primary ballot. And I did just a quick video about that. It is kind of there's nothing like trying to prove you're going to save democracy by first going out and trying to destroy it by making sure that people don't vote for the candidates that they want. How dare they? So it was kind of an exercise in futility in the sense of watching an incredibly sloppy and poorly thought out group of people out of Kitsap, encouraged by an NPR show that they listened to Steve Hobbs, Washington State Secretary of State, kind of explain this process that he didn't probably know very well either, and flounder through it in both Kitsap County Superior Court the week before and then last Thursday in Thurston Superior Court. Didn't go anywhere. I will point out, though, that what I referenced in that video, and I'll just let people know here right now, is that I did post the actual reply by the Joel Ard, who was the attorney for representing the Washington State Republicans. He's a great attorney, and his reply was actually really well laid out. So I attached that to the video description that I just launched, as well as the exhibits that he had attached there. So I can't say this will be the last attempt that the Democrats have to try to save democracy by preventing you from being able to vote for people that you want, but it certainly didn't go anywhere, and I generally don't think there's probably too much likelihood that that any of these efforts are going to succeed. They're mostly distraction, and they seem to be an exciting way for leftists to justify their existence, and that's how it goes. Real quick, as we get started here, I'm going to just go through a couple of places where I'll be speaking to activists, either doing training sessions or public presentations around the state. Anybody that has kind of followed me for a while knows I spend a lot of time doing that, traveling around the state. I go all over the place. I love the state, love meeting the people who care about trying to make a difference in Washington State. There's a lot of you out there, and there's always more coming in and getting involved. So I'd like to go. Enjoy really just traveling around the state and speaking to people and making presentations. So a quick reminder, in case you don't have this down and you live up in Snohomish County, this Thursday I'll be at the Lake Bollinger Center. That's 23,000 Lakeview Drive in Montlake Terrace. I'm doing a presentation there, just about an overview about activism and trying to give people some basic ideas of how to get started using the Public Records Act, Public Disclosure Commission reports, how to get organized locally, how to actually make a difference in your local community, just basic, practical, realistic things that I think activists can do to make a difference, or people who want to become more active in their community. And I'll be giving some examples and taking questions, and it's usually pretty interactive when I do these. That is scheduled to start at 6:30. I will be there at 6 when the doors open, because I need to get I need to help kind of get things set up and presented there. But if you want to talk to me, that's a great time. I'm usually pretty approachable, I think, at these events. And I think when I just talked to the organizer who was kind of getting that program going, it sounded like they had about 50 people already signed up. I think the room can hold about 100. So if you want to come, that's your time to come and meet me. There's no cost to doing it. At least I don't think there is. And I set out a tip jar for people who want to donate or help my efforts. But mainly, I'm trying to get more people involved and engaged in the political process. The future belongs to those who show up. If you show up Thursday, hopefully I give you some additional ideas and skills and handouts and things that might make your job a little bit easier as you try to figure out what you can do as an activist moving forward. Then the next day, starting on the 26th through, which is the 26th, which is a Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, this coming up weekend, out on Ocean Shores. If you haven't already signed up for the ROUT Conference, you're probably out of luck because they sold out last week. About 600 conservative or right-leaning sort of activists and politicians in Washington State will all be out at Ocean Shores at the convention center at the ROUT Conference. It is a great opportunity if you've already signed up and you're wondering if you want to go in this lovely weather that we're having in the Pacific Northwest. Please do. Don't sign up and not show up. You paid. You might as well come on out. And it's really a great opportunity. If you couldn't make it this time, make sure you go next year. It's really, I think, we got speakers coming, there's panels, there's debates, there's things like that. However, what I really think the biggest value in going to the ROUT Conference, and I do sit on that board, I've been on that board since I think 2015, and I've been going there since 2011. The conference I think started in 2009, if I remember. I should know off the top of my head, but it's been going for a little while. The real value, I think, of this conference is kind of this low barrier way of meeting a lot of other activists, a lot of other people who have the same concerns and interests and ideas that you do about trying to make a difference in Washington State, all in one place at one time. So the ability to network with a lot of people all at once who have traveled from all over the state to be there is a lot easier to do that when you have 600 people all in one room. It also gives you an opportunity to talk directly to some of the politicians who are, you might see in Olympia or you see on TVW. Mostly Republican politicians are who you're going to see there, and probably some recently elected local officials as well that you'll see. And there's a lot of these people that will be at this event, and it's really a great opportunity at Roanoke to meet them in an informal setting, see the comedy dinner on Saturday night. Again, the networking is really where I think when I've done just kind of informal surveys with other activists around the state, it turns out to be just a great place to network and come up with plans and schemes. I've hatched a lot of good activist plans and schemes at Roanoke, sometimes over adult beverages, and it's turned out to be a great opportunity if you want to do anything there. So sorry I went off in this complete segue for about ROUT Conference, because right after that, not the next week, but then the Tuesday, February 6th, I've mentioned this before, but at about 10 o'clock that morning or so, I'm meeting at the Skagit Women's Republican Club. They're doing a breakfast, or kind of a late breakfast event. I'm only going to be there for about half an hour. I'm doing their presentation to start out their event that day. And the reason why I'm kind of making that one tight is that I have roughly a noon presentation up in Bellingham at the Golf and Country Club with the Whatcom County Women's Republican Club. So I'm kind of having to go from Burlington up to Bellingham, and there's a little bit of a drive in between. So I've got two presentations. In both of those cases, I'm doing a public presentation there. So if you happen to be in Skagit County or Whatcom County, I'm pretty sure you can go to either one of those events. Happy to see you and chat with you there. I'll have a little bit more time at the Whatcom County event because I can stay later. I am meeting some activists that evening, I think. I usually try to when I'm up in that area. I used to live in Bellingham, so I always enjoy coming up there. Then February 8th, I'm going to be doing an event in Marysville. I just didn't write down the church. I know it's at a church, and I'm doing an event to kind of a new event for people involved in school boards and get involved in trying to make a difference there. That Saturday, I'll be up in San Juan County doing a presentation up in San Juan County. And I believe that's at the San Juan County Republican, so I think I'm in Friday Harbor there. Probably I'm on their agenda or their list as far as being a speaker coming up there. And then March 2nd, I'm the MC for the Lewis County Republicans down in, I believe that'll be in Chehalis or Centralia. And March 9th out in Kitsap County, I'll be the MC, kind of a co-MC out there. And March 23rd, it looks like, I'll be doing the Caper Banquet, MC that. I don't know why March has turned into my MC month, but for whatever reason, I'll be the Master Ceremonies sequentially in a row at those three different events in March. So lots of opportunities anywhere. I don't have a lot of Eastern Washington events right now, but usually those get added to the calendar. Right now, I just have those events. But So if you want to see me in person, those are great places to do so. So just a quick reminder as we go into some of these questions here, if you say @WeTheGovern, it's a little bit easier for me to pick your question out. I will try to, if I can read your question and you didn't do that, I'll still catch it. But I think that if you do that, it's a little bit easier for me just to see the question here. So let's get to the first one. Cristiano, you got a question here saying, is Seattle running out of money? I see they have a hiring freeze. Well, I do not know for sure that Seattle's running out of money, but it wouldn't surprise me because they spend money like, really, they give drunken sailors a bad name. The crazies who run the Seattle City Council, and even though I know they moderated a little bit with the last election cycle, some of the crazier people didn't get in, but they still have some crazies there. And of course, the people who actually run the city aren't the most prudent with how they spend their money. So it would in no way at all surprise me if they're running out of money, but there's a lot of money for them to run out of. So I'm not sure that they are. And when they say they have a hiring freeze, when I've seen that in the past, it's usually conditional hiring freeze. It means they'll hire certain people, they're just maybe not hiring others. So I'd have to dig into that. I'm not aware of them specifically running out of money. But it wouldn't surprise me the way they squander it and waste it. So second question here. Let's see. Jason got a question here. I like the campaign that Byrd is running and that he's connecting with the grassroots. I personally think Reichert is more electable, but he's not running a very good grassroots campaign. And there's actually another comment before then from Dawn also saying that she's frustrated that Semi Byrd doesn't have a chance. Or isn't being given a chance, I should say. Sorry, let me clarify that. So let me just talk about that briefly a little bit because, listen, it's early days, right, in the race for these statewide offices. Essentially, as I mentioned in some previous videos describing the significance of the Republican convention for the first time, at least since the top two primary system's been in place here, the Republican convention has an impact on Republican statewide offices directly and also on the congressional races, mainly because it's an endorsement vehicle for the party and specifically for the grassroots PCOs, precinct committee officers, and grassroots activists who go through the caucus process and will be at the party convention there to formally endorse the candidate that the Republicans support. Now, why is that unusual? Because if you haven't ever attended one of these things, you'll think, well, that's what they always do. But here's what happened with Washington State's top two jungle primary system that we have. The top two vote getters in a given race during the primary are the two that go forward. Theoretically, it could be, it's usually a Republican and a Democrat, but it could be two Democrats or two Republicans. Both scenarios have happened before. And so one of the challenges the Republican Party had is that several times in the recent past, the Republicans have flooded the zone with enough Republican candidates that they diluted the Republican vote down so low that two Democrats got through to the primary. It's happened in the 10th Congressional District. It's happened in the Secretary of State's race. Happened in the state, state auditor's race. It's happened in the 47th Ledge District. It's happened a number of times that way. Same thing happened to the Democrats, the state treasurer's race back in 2016, where there were 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and the 3 Democrats were equivalent to each other enough that they essentially canceled each other out, and the top 2 vote getters were Republicans in that case. And that's how Dwayne Davidson became state treasurer as a Republican for 4 years. So what the Democrat Party does to ensure that, or at least reduce the likelihood of that, is they go scorched earth on any candidates that they take seriously but they don't want in the race. And so they'll they'll basically blacklist any consultant that ever works with that candidate. If they've asked them to step down, they don't, then they really do a lot more heavy-handed sort of stuff behind the scenes. Or carrot and stick, they'll offer them a job somewhere if they stop running for office. They'll do that kind of stuff. The Democrats are much more aggressive in ensuring, or at least reducing the likelihood that something like that happens where they self-immolate their campaigns and get 2 Republicans through to the primary. That being said, the Republicans are a lot more hands-off. They've historically just allowed anybody who wants to run, go for it. Anybody can call himself a Republican, doesn't really matter. So that's why you'll have like 20 people saying they're Republicans running for the governor's race or other positions like that. And that's fine. They still can't change that. However, what the Republican Party is attempting to do with this endorsement process at the party convention is just make it so that the candidates that want to be serious will try to get grassroots support behind them. And if that candidate, whoever it happens to be, gets that support, then in theory, the Republican Party endorses that candidate, and therefore any communication about that office by the state party only talks about that candidate. And any money the state party gives to that campaign for that specific office only goes to that candidate that they've endorsed. So here's why this is where it comes down to between the Byrd and Reichert campaign. Reichert's raised a lot of money. And so he's been a much better fundraiser than Semi Byrd has been in this case. Semi Byrd has been running for longer, and he's been probably doing a better job outreaching, I think, to the grassroots kind of activists around the state. But he doesn't have a lot of money. And so you have these two differences in campaigns and in campaign styles. Now, to be fair, Reichert has been in Congress before, and he's been around a while. He was this King County sheriff before that. So he's going to have much better contacts and more connections with raising money, especially in the King County kind of Puget Sound Basin, which is going to be where his primary initial support is coming from. And so you're going to see that he's just better at fundraising. So he has more money, but he hasn't done kind of that statewide outreach as much to the individual PCOs and grassroots activists around the state. So this is kind of your classic fight that frankly, the Republicans have all the time. There's nothing unusual about this race. It's actually very typical. So you'll have one person that has a better connection to the established kind of fundraising sort of background, which is an important part of running for office. And then you'll have another one that has better connections or outreach to the activists and the grassroots activists, which is also an important part of the political campaign. You know, an optimal political campaign, you kind of marry both. But in this case, you kind of have there's a disparate separation here. I'm not formally endorsing anybody running for the governor's race right now, and I'm not doing that for several reasons. Because number one, at least when they were still going to have some debates, I was going to be the moderator, and you can't endorse one person or the other when you're going to be moderating the debates between these candidates. And I'd still like to hold out for the opportunity that they're going to debate in the future, and I'd still like to be the moderator in that debate if I can be. The other thing is I generally don't endorse in the primary as well, just because campaigns have to prove their mettle and demonstrate their ability to get across the finish line. I don't know how much endorsements really matter too much, especially at my lower level of endorsement. So I'm not really that concerned about it. I really want to see these candidates get out there, prove that they're capable of running for office, prove they're capable of doing the job that they need to do to win an election. Now, the Republican Party's significance in having their convention in April is purposely scheduled so that there's time after their endorsement for candidates to, in theory, decide, listen, maybe I'm gonna drop out or not drop out before the filing week in May, because the second week of May is essentially filing week. That's the official legal time that you need to file to get your name on the ballot. So you just need to file, especially statewide office holders like that. And some of them may decide, okay, listen, I'm not going to run because I don't have any money, or I'm not going to run because I don't have any support, or these two guys that are running are sucking all the oxygen from the room. So if there's a third candidate out there, they're just going to decide that it's not time to go ahead. So the theory is that gives the Republican Party a little bit more power than they've had in the past. So that's essentially what this is kind of rolling down to this situation right now, and that's a long explanation. The fight between Semi Byrd and Reichert. Listen, people get. I'm not a cult of personality guy. I've been around hundreds and hundreds of politicians now for a long, long time. Ever since I was a college Republican in school, politicians come and go. What you believe doesn't change, hopefully, and what you're trying to change doesn't change. Politicians either support what you're trying to change or not. I don't get caught up in so much the cult of personality, and I'm not going to just scorch earth people because I happen to support one person or the other in those races either. There's no doubt that an average Republican pulled out of any random group of people would be better than Bob Ferguson, who's running for governor. Probably any random drug addict that you pull out of a homeless camp would be better than Bob Ferguson for governor. So whoever comes through the primary to oppose Bob Ferguson is the person I'm getting behind, and we'll see where it goes from there. So sorry, I totally went off on a much wider tangent there than I was expecting. Okay, so let's get to another question here. So here's a question, Emily. What does it mean when an initiative is certified, that they have enough real signatures? I'm assuming that's what your question is there. And this is actually a pretty easy question, because after the 6 initiatives were submitted last year, which I volunteered, I was there at every single submission date, plus many of you who were activists and were out collecting signatures as well. I probably saw you at different fairs or other events around the state. All those 6 initiatives were submitted. And what happens is when they say they're certified, what that means is the Secretary of State takes a 3% sampling of, say, the 410,000 signatures that came in, and they randomly, it's a math model they use. We've actually argued, I believe, that the algorithm that they're using to determine that math model isn't quite perfect. There's actually a better way to do it, but fine, that's what we'll go with, right? That's what they're using. And one of the issues with it is they take that 3% sampling and then they try to validate the signatures on those initiatives, and they're essentially looking for 3 things. One is duplicate signatures. So did that person sign more than once as part of that 3% data set? They're looking for, are they a registered voter? And they're looking for, does the signature match the signature that's on file for that registered voter? Of those 3 things, 2 of them can be checked by the people who submit the signatures before they submit them to the Secretary of State's office. And the Let's Go Washington people did do that. So they already know that they have enough registered voters, and they already know that they don't have that many duplicates signed. So the only thing they can't check is whether that signature matches. So mostly what matters to those of us who were watching this process was whether the signature matched or not. And as they if a certain percentage of those signatures of that 3% data subset, if they go through that, it looks like the validity rate is high enough, they don't really look too much further, because you need 325,000 signatures roughly turned in, and the smallest amount that the Let's Go Washington people turned in was 420,000, right? So that's the small, or 422,000, I think. That's the smallest set that they turned in. It's almost 100. That's 100,000 more than what they needed. And some of them had 130,000 more than what they needed. So that little buffer, if you can't exceed that buffer, the subset, data set that you're looking at, or if it's not close, you're not going to go and count all 420,000 signatures to verify that they're all correct. You're using that, it's statistical sampling. That's essentially what they're doing. And so what it means is that when they say it's been certified, it means they've gone through, they've done this data set, and it's clearly certified, and they're moving forward. And I don't think they've certified every single one yet. I should go back and look at this, because I didn't look in the last week. But almost all of them have been certified, and here's the reality. If one got through and they were certified pretty easily, they're all going to probably get through, because generally when somebody was collecting signatures, if they got signatures on one, probably 80% of the people signed all 6. So it looks like all of those initiatives, I'm going to tell you're going to be voting on them in November, which is exciting, and it's a big deal, and it's the largest signature gathering effort on a conservative side of things that's ever been done in America, certainly the largest in our state, and it's an important and significant thing, and it gives everybody a reason to ballot harvest, to scrounge up every homeless camp ballot you can get, make sure everybody votes, and gets those initiatives across the finish line in November, because it's a big deal. They're on the ballot. A lot of money and time was spent to get them there. Let's try to get them over the ballot or into law. The left is panicked about this because a lot of grant grifting operations and a lot of insider dealing is put at risk by these initiatives, and they're freaking out about it right now. You don't have to believe me. Just look at Inslee's press conferences, or Lori Jenkins, the speaker. I mean, Pat's just lying about things. It's beautiful, actually, to watch the chaos on that side. So there's a lot going on right now, and that's exciting. By the way, one of the things I try to ask, and just to point out, if you want to tell me where I'm always interested in people who are watching the live stream. Tell me where you're watching it from. I had somebody watching from New Zealand, which was pretty cool. And it's surprising to me that the show would have any following, but I do note that I do have people on both my website and my YouTube channel that do watch from New Zealand and Australia and England sometimes, and Canada. But it's interesting to see the people who log in and tell me where they're watching from. So let me know. You don't have to tell it specifically, just general city area in Washington State, probably mostly. But if you're watching from somewhere else, let me know. So let's get back to the questions here. There's a question below that one that says, likelihood the bills forcing sheriff background checks will pass. That's a question mark. Don't know, can't tell yet. It's a good question. We're right in the middle of early days of this legislative session. This is the short session, not the long session, which means all the politicians in Olympia, especially the House, those in the House that are their legislators, not so much on the Senate side, but the legislators all have to run for re-election. About half the senators have to run for re-election, the state senators. And so they really do want to get out on the campaign trail. And so there's incentive for them to have the short session to kind of get it through pretty quickly. They really only have their first constitutional duty as legislators when they have a session like this is to basically get the budget passed. But the main budget gets passed. We have a biennium process, so it's a 2-year budget. That got passed last year. They're going to be doing a supplement to that budget, but that's really their highest priority. Second highest priority under the Constitution is actually to ignore or pass the initiatives. I'm anticipating because the Democrats certainly don't want to reduce how many taxes they're collecting from you. They don't want the police to chase criminals, and they certainly don't want parents having the right to know what the heck's going on in school. So I think the Democrats will probably ignore the initiatives, but that is their second thing they have to do. And then after that, whatever clownish bills they happen to get through. Listen, the majority of the bills they propose are not going to get through, so that's why you're probably asking about this question. But you need to see how far along the process it goes, whether it has a bill that matches in the Senate and the House. And I don't know enough for sure right now to be able to tell if any of these are going forward. Let's see. Cristiano, there's a video of the Argentinian president eliminating secretaries. One of the secretary terminated was of education. He said this video, in the video, this is where indoctrination happens. Yes, he's right. The new president of Argentina has been awesome. Listen, I don't always know how to equate what a political leader in another country is saying or doing. You lose a little bit in the translation. You don't have the same attachment to the language and understanding what the cultural issues are they're trying to address. And so it's very easy for somebody to say, hey, I'm a Republican here, but if I was in Germany, I would be that. Or if I was in Australia, I would be in this party or whatever. It's a little bit easier on English-speaking countries, I think. But Argentina is just kind of interesting because I've only been there once. Years ago, my friend and I decided we would try to climb Mount Aconcagua, and so we went down to Mendoza, which is like northern Argentina, and stayed at a youth hostel for a little while, and then we went up and did our best to summit the mountain. I discovered that at above 20,000 feet or so, that I just don't want to eat food anymore when I'm hiking at that higher altitude. And it was a great weight loss program for me for a month. I think I lost about 35 pounds or so. I did fail to summit. It was kind of I wish I had summited. My friend who went with me did summit, but a lot of funny stories from that trip. I spent almost a month in Argentina back in 2006, but I don't really know a lot about the country or the culture there as much. Being on a mountain is not a realistic assessment of what the country's like, especially since everyone around you is usually from some other country. And my time in Mendoza was relatively limited. But I do know that Argentina's had a disaster of socialist policies for a long, long time. And it was shocking to have somebody come in and who's actually willing to call him out on it. I don't know what kind of resistance that guy really has to his policies in that country, and I did love his speech at Davos, just calling out the political elite, who believe they can kind of control the world from there, and his confrontation there was beautiful. I also liked what the Heritage Foundation guy had to say. That's an unusual thing. I haven't seen that so much at the Davos nightmare zone, but it was good to see politicians, or at least people willing to go there, stand up against them and call them out to their face. Hopefully more people do that, and then it'd almost be worth watching them. But I have seen some of the stuff that the Argentinian president's doing down there, and it's been pretty interesting to me. Has anyone, here's a question from Hammer Edge, was anyone in the unemployment department held accountable for the Nigeria debacle, is I'm assuming what you meant there. The answer to that is, of course, not. Bob Ferguson absolutely doesn't want to figure out which internal employee turned off all those security features and made sure that $600 million disappeared out of the state budget. So the FBI apparently doesn't want to figure that out either, and so everyone's going to look the other way. Where that money really went, did it really go to Nigeria? I don't know. Did it come back as campaign contribution to certain politicians, or was it just flat out stolen by with some insider help? And maybe I would be looking for employees who work there who in a year or so suddenly come into mysteriously a large amount of money suddenly, or perhaps the employee that's floating in Capitol Lake. But whatever happens, nobody's going to be held accountable. Our government has no interest in actually solving those types of crimes. What they want to do is put you in jail for parading without a permit. Let's see. Critical conservative, what's your thoughts on the Clark County election confidence initiative? I think what you're referring to is one that hasn't necessarily been approved yet. There's been an effort to try to address some of the concerns that everybody has about Clark County's auditors' election processes, and there has been a proposed initiative. I'm familiar with it. There was actually a call about this one recently, and I would need to dig back into the details on it. I had a couple concerns on whether it was legally enforceable the way it was drafted. But to be fair, and I'm trying to be fair here, I didn't raise those concerns with anybody. It was just a rough overview, and I would have to dig into it a little bit more before I would be able to speak intelligently on what that initiative does or doesn't do. Local initiatives, even under the charter process that the counties, like Clark County, has implemented, there's about 7 of them that have technically implemented this local initiative process. What we have found is that there's a false promise of local initiatives that comes with setting up a charter county. And usually if you have an initiative to reduce taxes or make government more transparent or something, usually they find an excuse not to do it. So, and I've gone out and helped activists in 4 cities back in 2014 get local, just simple initiatives through their charter review process that supposedly allowed local initiatives. And in each case, I found it was a pretty weak process, and they were able to eliminate that. Patricia, you got a question. What about King County, Bellevue, and Renton areas for events? I'd love to come out there. I'm not scheduling these events. It's other people who schedule events for me usually, and I come out there and speak. So if you want me out there, meet up with some other people in your area. Try to get a decent enough group of people you think will be there, and just take care of local logistics. I'll show up and help. I'm happy to do training sessions or just speak at an event. And I love that area. That's an area close to where I grew up. I grew up in what's now the Newcastle area, on our old farm that we had up there. A lot of family from Renton. I have in-laws in Bellevue today, so I just I'm comfortable going up there. I'm up there all the time, so we might as well get an event going up there. I'd love to do that. So let's see. Next question. What would it take to appeal the 16th and, I'm assuming to repeal. This is a question from Rock. What would it take to repeal the 16th and 17th Amendment of the Constitution? Oh, a heck of a lot of work. I mean, if you've ever looked at what it takes to repeal an amendment, I mean, really the best example of one that was actually repealed, of course, was the First Amendment that made alcohol illegal at a federal level. And by the way, just as a little trivia question, in case people are interested, in Washington State, when they first introduced the statewide initiative process in 1912 as a constitutional amendment to the state, one of the warnings against it that the opponents of the initiative process in the state had, and the citizens have been trying to get it on the state constitution for about 15 years before they succeeded. One of the warnings that those who opposed the initiative process had was that it was going to be used to make alcohol illegal. And they're right, because that was the first thing that they did with that initiative process, and was to make alcohol illegal. Washington went the full prohibition route, almost 10 years, I think, before the feds did. And it was a very popular movement in Washington. It was a very Republican movement back then, if you look back, and it was also very, women were driving that initiative as an idea. And Washington State gave women the right to vote in 1910. And so it was kind of no surprise that the Women got the right to vote in Washington State in 1910. The initiative process was implemented in Washington State in 1912, and then the first initiative was to make alcohol illegal, which was kind of a funny background on. I'm pretty sure it was the first initiative, but they had warned about it being one of the first initiatives, and sure enough, that's what happened. So, but if you go through the process, it was not easy. It's not easy to get an amendment to the Constitution passed in the first place, and I'm thankful that that's a difficult process. But even when one passes, to repeal it, you essentially have to go through that same process. It's very difficult. So there's a lot of work you'd have to do to go through, and it takes a large number of states to approve it and ratify it. It's not just lobbying D.C. and getting them to say they're going to do it. It takes a lot of work. So I don't think it's as easy as people think. Let's see, Jason got a question. Thoughts on Washington? You say meaning natural gas connections and possibly banning it altogether. And I think what you really are saying is limiting or restricting natural gas connections. And yeah, Jason, it's a good question because it really has kind of happened very quickly, and it's become a national drama as well. And that is certain cities like Spokane, Seattle, like some of these other cities have decided, hey, we're going to make it so that no new construction has natural gas connections. Now, nobody's coming out to take away your old natural gas connections. They're just talking about not letting you get a natural gas connection in your new home construction, which is absurd and ridiculous for a lot of reasons. Number one, if you have a natural gas connection to your house, it gives you an ability to actually substantially reduce your electrical bill. Because you can do things like have your dryer, your hot water tank, and stove, and usually your heater for the house on natural gas. There's an argument as to how much money you're saving or not, but there's a couple benefits you get if you run natural gas to those primary kind of power hog appliances in your house, and that is that if you have a generator for when the power goes down for some reason, it means that using the natural gas, you're actually able to still run almost all of the functions in your house, just like with a relatively modest generator. If you're running like a heater or some of these other high wattage, high amperage connections, then you need a much, much larger generator, which is a lot more expensive, and fewer people are going to get that type of generator, or it's going to be a little bit harder to get those types of generators. So that's one thing that's kind of different. Of course, the argument that the enviros use on this is that they're trying to save the planet and reduce carbon dioxide, and that and fossil fuels, of course. God help us if you use fossil fuels. And at the same time, the same clowns that are pushing that policy are deciding that taking out dams is a good idea, shutting down all our power generation. What could go wrong? So anyway, it's really ridiculous, and that's what's going on. And I don't. It seems like it's losing on some legal fights in a few places. So the courts have overturned it a little bit, but we'll have to see where it goes. There's a lot of people mentioning where they're coming from or where they're logging on to in this live stream. So Renton, which is a great place to, I like Renton a lot. Yakima, Port Orchard, had a presentation out in Port Orchard not that long ago. Another Renton person. Auburn, love Auburn. Ole, near where I live, about 30 minutes from where I live. Davenport, Washington. I was just out there last year doing a presentation in Davenport. Tacoma, Kennewick. Emily's telling me you're from Kennewick. I'm trying to get out there to the Tri-Cities to do a presentation pretty soon. Don't have a date on that, but I think that's happening. Vancouver, which is where I'm actually broadcasting today from. Key Peninsula, out on the Olympic Peninsula there. Danville, Eatonville, good place. Anyway, thanks everybody for logging in. I always like kind of get a sense of where you're coming from here. T.T. Burton, do you know what is going on with the money for Partnership for Zero? We are in Seattle, part of the homeless grift. Yes, it is. Here's the thing. All of these kind of projects are basically con games. There's no real intention of the organization to collect the cash to solve the problem that they've convinced the politicians or the taxpayers to give them money for. They don't really have an intention to solve that problem, because if they solve the problem, then they potentially have smaller grants next year. So it's one big game. It's a con game, really. And so they want to absorb as much cash, solve as little of the problem as possible. In fact, it's better if they make it worse because they get a bigger budget next time. A lot of people make a living essentially taking your taxpayer dollars and ensuring that the problem they promised to solve never gets solved. And in fact, they try to make it worse. That's just how it works. There's no other logical, rational reason or conclusion you can come to when you look at the disaster that most of these nonprofits actually operate at. And they just keep changing their names. It's oftentimes the same people that move from, grant grifting operation to grant grifting operation. If you don't know what grant grifting is, I did a whole video on this about basically what it is, but it's just finding an excuse to get taxpayer dollars, unaccountable taxpayer dollars, and then not solve the problem that you've been hired to solve. So I'm sure it's being stolen there, or essentially being stolen. Maybe they can legally cross the T's and dot the I's and not formally steal it, but it's essentially just being squandered and wasted, like most of your tax dollars are in Seattle. So, Patricia, in your opinion, what do you think will help us in Washington State to have a fair election result in the November election? Well, that's a good question. Number one, show up. I don't care. Staying home is the most foolish thing you can do. And when I say that, I mean not voting at all is the most foolish thing you can do. But it's not just that. Sending in your ballot is such a low bar, such a low activity for you, that should be the least that you do. What you really need to do is get as many people as you know. I mean, literally go out there, get them to fill out their ballots, get them to vote, take it down yourself, stuff those drop boxes with it. Deliver it even better, deliver it directly to the auditor's office. Really get out there, especially the initiatives. I think these initiatives are significant change agents in the state if they get passed, and they should get passed. They're very popular. So that's what you want to do, get involved, have a ton of observers, flood the zone with the observers. I still think that any games that might be being played, and there's some stuff that we're looking at in Clallam County and Spokane, Clark is one of the counties we're looking at. We're trying to pay attention to a couple of these counties that seem to have problems on a regular basis, not just King. King is clearly one of them. But flooding the zone with observers so you're always there, paying attention to what's going on. You've got a big teams of people working it. I still think that helps, but it's more than that. You also have to, on the input side, get as many of those ballots in. I don't recommend that you go break the law the way that some of these leftist groups are doing. I'm never going to advocate breaking the law the way they do. But ballot harvesting is legal in this state. It is illegal in many states. Most states have it being illegal. They've overturned some elections recently because of illegal ballot harvesting done in other states, a couple city elections recently. But in our state, it's perfectly legal. So you can go ahead and collect all those ballots you want from homeless camps, from your apartment complexes, from wherever. And if you got those people, the original people whose ballots you have there, get them to fill it out, make sure they vote, and get it in the mail. Or don't get it in the mail, just go and deliver it directly to the auditor. I say mail, but please don't put it in the mail. Post office is an incompetent government agency, just like so many others. And it's shocking how many of their ballots they lose, or the problems that I think the post office is under right now. It's not a conspiracy even as much as just the inevitable decay of the bureaucracy that's occurring there. But try to get out there and just participate, educate, communicate, aggressively do this stuff. The people who are telling you there's no point in voting are part of the problem. They're the ones that want it to stay as bad as it is, or they have some kind of apocalyptic mindset where they think living in a bunker is going to be the solution to all the world's problems. We got to get out there and be engaged. I'd much rather avoid problems, and voting's going to help. It's not just about the politicians; it's about these initiatives too. And I think that'll make it work if you can get out there and be engaged. And here's the other thing: collect those ballots that are just laying around. When they do the mailing, we have such a botched and incompetent and disastrous mail list here. I mean, Bob Ferguson's mailing checks to dead people who died during the Cold War, right, for his little tuna check program, but even that gives an example of just how egregiously incompetent their database system is here, or whatever database that they're using. These guys don't presume a level of competency there. It doesn't exist. But there are groups, I think, that collect those undeliverable ballots, that collect those ballots that you see laying around the post office, around your apartment mailbox, or around homeless camps, and they nefariously fill them out. Nobody's really checking on those, really. Whatever they tell you they think their checks and balances are, it's very questionable, and we've caught a lot of deficiencies with most of the auditors, not all of them, but most of them, in actually doing what they say they're going to do. So hold on to them. If nobody's going to fill them out, it's better that you hold on to them so that nobody goes out and falsifies those ballots. Let's see. Aardvark what's your favorite Queen song? How about We Will Rock You? That's always a good one. Jason, you got a question. Is it a coincidence that New Mexico is looking to pass a carbon copy of the laws that we have? No, it's not a coincidence. None of these guys have unique thoughts. They all kind of coordinate with each other. If you've ever been to these group think meetings, like Davos is the big worldwide kind of group think meeting, it's just about political elites all getting together and deciding this is going to be our agenda or orthodoxy or what we're going to accept and support today. The reason why people pay attention to those is that it's kind of a precursor of dumb or bad ideas that they're floating out there before they decide, can we make this policy locally? What I want to explain to people is that if you've ever gone to some of these meetings, and I've gone to smaller versions, I've never gone to Davos, but I've been to the little local meetings that are kind of like that, where they get a bunch of lefty attorneys together and they discuss water policy, or they discuss rental policy, or they discuss dam policy, or whatever it is that they're discussing there. You get a really good sense. I mean, they're all kind of in this groupthink mindset, and they're trying to basically coordinate with each other for talking points, for language that they're going to be using, for legal excuses or lawfare approaches to trying to push that agenda down. It's not that easy. And so they're all trying to get together and coordinate on these things, and they have a lot of pesky things in their way, right? You and I, the public, politicians who don't like them, maybe other competing special interests. There's other things that get in the way, and so they don't like that. And so they get together with these little groups and meetings, and a lot of times there's a ton of bad, dumb ideas there that never go anywhere, but they will coordinate and get these ideas put together. So New Mexico is going to imitate what Washington does. Washington will imitate what Colorado does sometimes. California will imitate, or vice versa. A lot of times California's the stupidest ideas in California will start there and then be imitated in other places. And so that's why what happens in these other states matters. It matters because it's coming to you, and it doesn't matter if you live in Texas or Idaho or Montana or New Mexico. It all starts somewhere. And so an attack on freedom in one part of our country might as well be an attack on your freedom, because it may not be here yet, but if it succeeds there, it tends to roll out that way. So let's see. Stephanie got a question here. Well, it's not really a question, is it? No, it is a question. So have you seen the Halderman report regarding the hacking of tabulators? I don't know if I've seen that one. I've seen a bunch of these. To be honest, there were several reports that were done before the 2016 election that were essentially that. They might have had a couple of updates or different versions of that lately. So if you're asking me about it, mention something so that I know why you're asking. I'm somewhat familiar with some of those reports at the time. And remember, one of the things about tabulators being hacked in our state because of the mail-in voting approach, the tabulator hacking is a little less useful in Washington state just because of the ability to do hand recounts. We always have paper here. The biggest concern with tabulators being hacked is mostly in states that do all electronic voting, in person but electronic voting. That's a problem because there's really no good way to go back and verify whether the tabulators are correct or accurate. It's in those types of states I'd be most concerned about tabulator hacking situations, really not so much in Washington. We have other problems here that can be kind of unique to our situation, but the tabulator hacking is not the concern. It's not the highest concern I would have in our state. One of the things I was going to mention here was, TZ, thank you. 1933 alcohol prohibition was repealed. Yeah, so that's at the federal level, and that trickled down to the state too. The funny thing is, what I don't remember about that is how the state went about, how Washington State went about dealing with it. Alcohol, the whole creation of the Liquor Control Board came out of that era in Washington State. And remember, we were the last state, I think we were one of the last states anyway, that would allow places like Costco to sell alcohol. So because they've been illegal up until a few years ago, what Costco did is they basically ran an initiative to allow stores, any store, to carry alcohol, bigger stores. And so it was a big battle that they fought through, a big initiative, lots of money, and they got it through. And the state agency that was involved in the Liquor Control Board didn't like it because it basically ended up shutting down a lot of the alcohol stores. Up until then, the state sold you all your alcohol. Now, the state still collects the ridiculous taxes on it, but at least now you can buy it at Costco. Let's see. Let's see. Somebody's trying to make fun of Tacoma. Come on, guys. Don't make fun of Tacoma. Then Arsenio has a question. Do you think the bills being proposed to take Trump off the ballot will be successful? Okay, so here's, okay, this is a little different than the two, including the video I just launched about an hour ago. And then the video I did last week about the Kitsap County effort. Those are essentially kind of the same effort in two different courts. And that was just kind of a slipshod, sloppy NPR dream idea that 8 activists out of Kitsap County tried to remove Trump from the primary ballot. And they both failed. It was a pretty sloppy and poorly executed effort that is legally, it was questionable from the beginning, and executed poorly to boot. But nevertheless, the media got excited about it. And the question really is whether there's going to be any kind of a way that somebody could try to remove Trump or anybody else really from the ballot. If somebody can remove Trump, then I don't see why I can't remove Bob Ferguson from the ballot. So but they're going to try that effort. And there was a proposal by the 30th Ledge District legislator. I actually talked about one of my videos. Now I'm blanking on her name. But anyway, so she's prime sponsor of the bill. But I don't know if that really has support. Now, because the Democrats are so freaked out and paranoid about Trump, like beyond all rational thought, that I think that maybe they get some variation of this bill out the door. It seems if they do, then of course they're going to try to challenge Trump. I'm not sure that they can succeed. There's a really big question, and it could very well be that the Supreme Court rules on either the Maine case seems most likely, but maybe the Colorado case. But I mean, it's going to be another state that determines whether or not this is even an option. And I think that it doesn't seem like it's highly likely. Again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I know I'm fully aware of how the rules don't apply and the rule of law is largely destroyed and not all people are treated equally. I'm fully aware of all this stuff. Listen, I've been in court a lot, so I know personally from firsthand experience what I'm talking about. But that being said, I'm fairly sure that even that bill probably won't make it there, but I'm sure there's going to be some other efforts. Listen, this is a great way to get your name in the paper, to say you're attacking Trump. It's the same way that Bob Ferguson got his name in the paper for all those pointless lawsuits that he filed against the Trump administration. Remember, many of them went nowhere. And Ferguson just kind of lied about his record that he got out of all that. Most of them were relatively minor or insignificant things, and a lot of them he lost. And but it's a great way for Ferguson to raise campaign finance money, right? That was the whole point, was to use his office as Attorney General to raise money for his future political campaign. So that's all Ferguson did with those pointless lawsuits. So if you're a Democrat candidate for office, and especially if you're kind of a boring one that has nothing else going for you, you need to be able to try to raise money for some reason. This is a great excuse. No matter how stupid or failed the effort is, people will give you money if you just say you're attacking Trump. So it kind of makes sense that they may try to do it. I just don't know that it's going to be successful. Arsenio, you got a question here about, do you think the initiatives will pass in November? And the answer to that, I believe, is that they will. There's 6 of them. And any common sense survey that's structured around these initiatives shows that they're very popular. If you think about it, I mean, 4 of them essentially, although 2 of them are kind of tied together, but 4 of them cut people's taxes, real people's taxes. They reduce the cost of living in Washington. Those are going to be very popular. The other one, police pursuit, incredibly popular, letting parents have some modicum of transparency on what's exactly going on with their kid when they're around other adults in both the medical and school system. Those also are very popular. So in order to defeat those initiatives that are already popular, so they start out very popular, in order to defeat those, you got to spend a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, it's a lot. I can't see how they could run any kind of a campaign without spending more than $50 million. Now, $50 million to the left is like $10 million for a conservative cause, because the left really runs campaigns that grifted a lot of money out of it for themselves. I mean, they really know how to enrich themselves in doing this stuff, so they're far less efficient at how they spend the money, even compared to most incompetent Republican campaigns. They usually do a worse job spending that money. So I can't see how they can successfully defeat those initiatives with anything less than a massive campaign, and I'm not even sure that would be enough. And remember, we just recently had Tim Eyman's $30 card tabs initiative, which I know is going to lead to the next question here, but the $30 card tabs initiative where Eyman had zero money, the other side spent $5 million trying to defeat it. They had every newspaper in the planet, every television station, everything supporting and helping the left to defeat that initiative, and it still passed. I do know about the legal argument later. Of course, I was there, but what I'm telling you is that that was another indication, and the left's not all the people on the left are totally insane. Some of them will realize that that money may not be spent well, and they'd rather just use it for their campaigns. Or maybe they'll try to use it for a legal fight later on. I think the initiatives are likely to pass in November, but it doesn't happen by osmosis or accident. You have to get out there and work for it. Yep, Charles, love it. Yeah, the bunkers are quiet and cool in the summer. I think that's what you meant as quiet, not quite. But when you're just the last guy in the bunker, I cannot see how you will last long or make much of an impact. Jason, do you know Sideshow Bob will be doing any public events? It's like this guy is in a protection program. I would love to ask this guy questions. Well, I'm going to point out something. Bob Ferguson isn't going to do any campaign event until after the session is closed. It's illegal in Washington state for political candidates during the legislative session to raise funds. I love that law, and I'll tell you why. It was originally intended just to prevent politicians from being corrupt and taking money and therefore changing what right in the middle of session and changing bills that come up on the agenda or voting for them. And I know that was the intention, but the reality is what I love about it is it incentivizes our politicians to shorten and get out of session as quick as possible. All of them, especially if they're incumbents, because they can't go out fundraise until the session's over. It's a beautiful incentive structure that encourages them to get out of session as quick as they can. So they hate doing special sessions. There was a couple years ago where Inslee was doing these special sessions and pissing off all the Democrat incumbents because they all wanted to get out and start raising money and campaigning, and they couldn't do that as long as the session kept getting extended. So it created a lot of animosity between them and Inslee at the time. So because of that, I do think Ferguson's going to want to encourage a shorter session, even if he doesn't get some of his agenda through, because he's essentially done with the AG's office. He's really looking to run for governor. He's all in on this, so he's kind of committed. And he's got to get out there and fundraise for it because he's not a likable guy. He doesn't have as much going for him as people think. His support is weak within his own party. A lot of people hate him inside the Democrat Party for different reasons. It's not always the same thing. It's not because they don't ideologically align with him. They'll still maybe vote for him, but he doesn't have he's not generated like an incentive structure for people to go out and campaign for him. So that's why you're having a hard time seeing him on the campaign trail, because he's not campaigning, and he won't campaign until after the session's over. So the advantage that somebody like Reichert and Semi Bird do is they're not an incumbent, so they're not constrained by the same restriction. So if you're challenging somebody that's in the legislature, they're an incumbent and you're a challenger, the challenger's not restricted by campaigning or fundraising during the legislative session. They can go out and do that all they want. So because of that, that's probably why you're going to see that you can see these other people out here running, but you don't see Ferguson out doing that. Let Jason, get to your bunkers and start prepping. Nothing wrong with prepping if that's what you want to do. I don't think it's a bad idea to be prepared long before it was cool. I always thought it was cool. It was fun that my grandparents had their kind of a cool shelter down below where they would keep all the canned food we used to can a lot of our own food at the farm. And it was always kind of cool to me. It seemed like, we had enough to last for 10 years there for all 17 cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff. And so I always kind of liked that idea. So there's nothing wrong with having a bunker or two or a place to store food and be prepared for tough times. If you live rurally, you might be that way automatically. It's become more cool lately since they've come up with the concept of preppers, and nobody has created more preppers in Washington State than Jay Inslee, homeschoolers too. So anyway, that's just a funny thing here. The private schools have their own DIE boards. Yes, they do. A lot of the private schools are actually almost as bad as the public schools. So just be involved in your kids' education and try to avoid the worst ones that are out there if you can. Okay, Robert, okay, this is kind of just a repeat, but you had a question here about what happened to remove Trump from ballot thing. It failed, did a video on it today. Go check it out on my video channel. Jason, got a question. Is Colorado lost cause? I thought about moving there for jobs, but it's moved even further to the left from Washington. Yeah, that's a great question. Let me talk about Colorado a little bit, because I think there was a book called The Blueprint, right, which essentially outlined the 7 billionaires or 6 billionaires, I think, that got together and decided they wanted to flip Colorado from being a Republican stronghold to being a left-leaning stronghold, which they appear to have been successful in. And they did that in a relatively short period of time. I think it took about 5 to 8 years to implement. And it was a plan. They put together this plan and they launched it. The things that I saw later on were conservatives trying to imitate that plan, right? And I just don't think it's as cookie cutter as people believe. Colorado was a good case of the Republican Party and the conservative movement being fractured, incompetent, and corrupt themselves, which tends to open themselves up to all kinds of bad things happening. There's no such thing as a lost cause. I do think you get situations like where Illinois or California are, where the volume of people moving is so high, and the collapse of civilization internally is so bad, and their budget process, which actually has a bigger impact than people realize, is so catastrophic that you're going to have a long time before you change. But remember, we've watched a number of states flip and change pretty quickly. People were talking about Florida being lost years ago, and yet suddenly look at how much change in Florida. So these things do happen. Jason got a question on thoughts on the Boeing fiasco. Is there a reason that they had to leave for South Carolina in a hurry? Nikki Haley is up to her eyeballs in Boeing shortcuts. Well, here's the thing about Boeing. Anybody that's grown up in the Puget Sound area, and I'm fifth generation Washingtonian and fifth generation actually King County, although I don't live in King County anymore, you would have always family members or different people that work for Boeing. My grandma worked there. I had uncles that worked there. Plenty of friends from high school, and you just know a lot of people that work at Boeing. It's one of the bigger employers. Boeing was driven out of Washington State by the stupidity mostly of King County and to some extent of the state. And they also had some political diversification that they were trying to get, in the sense that they wanted to be in a variety of legislative and Senate districts where they had some influence over those politicians too, because they had a lot of employment there. So it makes sense if you're a big manufacturer, and Boeing on a bad day, if it goes down, it actually impacts GDP for America. So it's big enough, because they're selling these super expensive planes, that they genuinely have a big impact. What I think Boeing's big downfall is more internal to Boeing, which is when the McDonnell-Douglas merger occurred. The way they changed their leadership and their lack of focus on quality and engineering, and they shifted into a cost-cutting, outsourcing mindset that I think was a big mistake for Boeing. Just from people who worked there and were involved in this whole process, they've really opened themselves up to problems that you see now today. Now, on top of that, what's gained a little more attention, of course, is their whole diversity, inclusion, equity, the DIE agenda that they've implemented internally, meaning that merit now doesn't mean anything. And since quality control is going to heck, they've outsourced a lot of stuff so they can shift the blame, but that doesn't keep your plane in the air. And all these other problems all at one time. It's just finally starting to catch up. What you see right now is 30 years in the making. And it's going to take Boeing a while to fix and address this stuff, and I think it's going to hurt them a lot. So we just have to see where it goes. Charles, you got a question? I heard you can find John Galt in St. George, Utah. Could be, don't know. But I always appreciated the references to where is John Galt. So who is John Galt? I like that. TZ, you got a question here. Do you know about Sideshow Bob's lawsuit, Washington versus Gator Guns? Challenge a Washington magazine ban filed in Cowlitz County. It looks like Bob is going to lose this one. I do know about that, and I like the attorneys on it. Pete Serrano, who happens to be running for Attorney General for Washington State, is the lead counsel in that case for the Silent Majority Foundation. Gator Guns, I met him when I was speaking down there. I think I was the MC for Cowlitz County's Lincoln Day dinner last time. I didn't get a chance to talk to the Gators gun owners. He was there, and they had put some stuff out for one of the auction items, some ammo. Nobody has enough of it. I don't need it as anybody else. And I didn't get a chance to follow up with them, but I've been kind of tracking a little bit what Pete Serrano sends out as an updates on the case. And it does look like the state is not doing well in this case. And they were very wise to retain jurisdiction of this case in Cowlitz County. The Thurston County judges are quite corrupt. It's a general rule, politically influenced very extensively. Every judge in Thurston County has ties to the state for the most part, and a couple of them are just completely insane. So, and yet Thurston County kind of functions like the D.C. court does for the federal stuff, where a lot of constitutional cases go there, where they can destroy your constitution. So it kind of does matter that this case stayed in Cowlitz. Now, you still have to go through the appeals process and state constitution or state Supreme Court, which is very politically influenced, let's just say that. So, winning at this level is a big deal, and I think this is a good case. You got a good attorney there. Gators Guns is incredibly brave for being willing to fight this battle and stick with it, so I'm very proud of them for doing that. Everybody, when you have a case like that, like Sporting Systems in Vancouver, Gator Guns, where these guys are willing to take the fight to the left and put essentially their business is on the line for these really expensive litigations, please make sure you patronize those businesses because they're doing the right thing. Tyler, you got a question here. Thoughts on Dave Reichert? I've already spoken earlier in the live stream about just the differences between Semi Bird and Dave Reichert's campaign for governor. And, again, as I mentioned before, anybody's better than Bob Ferguson. But what these campaigns have to do at this level is they have to demonstrate they can get through to each step moving forward, right? And it's hard. It's emotionally draining. Listen, I don't think anybody who hasn't run for office before can truly comprehend the pressure and the personal pressure that you feel if you're the candidate whose name's on that ballot. You get pressure on your family, you get pressure on your ego, you get pressure on your time, you get a million people telling you what to do, and their name's on the ballot, right? They're not the ones that are out there actually trying to make a difference. And it's just kind of ridiculous how much pressure they get underneath them. And so people under that kind of pressure sometimes make good decisions, sometimes make bad decisions. But they're trying to run for office, and no matter what, if you're the Republican running for statewide office, you're the challenger, and you are fighting an uphill battle. And so in order to prevail, you need to do everything right. You can't be asleep at the switch. You can't go back and take anything for granted. You really have to do a good job. So whether it's Reichert, whether it's Semi, I don't think it's going to be anybody else. A little too late for somebody to jump in that race right now, although technically there's still time between now and May. But, they're going to have to just hold it together and just keep making it happen. TZ, I know I'm at 1 hour. I usually try to stop this pretty quick. Let me just kind of start. I will start rolling down, but I do want to point out that I've got a couple videos coming out, and I would encourage you to kind of be prepared for them. I'll try to prep them up in the next couple days, premiere them, and launch them before Roanoke if I can. And I do want your feedback on these videos if you can. One of them is about a survey that was done recently of elites, about 1,000 elites, self-defined elites. People make a lot of money, postgraduate degree, went to an Ivy League school, such and such, how they view the world compared to you and I. It was a great survey, and the results are very eye-opening and very impactful and very significant. The traditional media, I think, is going to ignore this because it's not the story that they want you to hear, which is why I did the video, and I'm going to link to the report in my video. I'll put up on my website as well. But it's really an interesting, what happens is I link it on my website, and then I put it in the video description, so it's there up below. But it's really an interesting, I think it's an interesting video. I think it raises a lot of interesting questions. I think it helps explain some of the irrational behavior that we oftentimes see occurring at the basically at the decision-making process from a public policy standpoint, and kind of this tied into corporate business and media and the education kind of establishment, and why their groupthink seems so disconnected from the rest of us. And it was really a powerful study that was done, survey, and the results are interesting, quite worthwhile to look at. there's also good things, I think, that come out of that when you see the potential and why I think the elites have absolutely no idea what's happening in real America, and why I think they'll be surprised, just like I think they were in 2016. Many of us were surprised that Trump got elected, right? But the elites in particular were shocked. So I think that there's a rumbling out there, a rate of change that ends up coming, and I don't think they can stop it. So anyway, with that, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this. Please feel free to share this with others if you think they're going to benefit from it. I am going to generally try to do these on Tuesdays at 5:30. Every now and then I have to switch the day around. Obviously, February 6th, I'm probably going to do it the day before I do those events. But I just hopefully I've been able to answer most of your questions. Love to see where everybody's logging in from, and we'll see you next week. And don't forget to share, subscribe, like. If you want to support me, go ahead and go on my website, and you can donate to the cause or see me at one of these events and do the same. And hope all's well. If I see you at Roanoke, please come up and make a point of saying hi. And